So now that we have Sublime Text installed, let's run through some of the basics. I can open up all my applications by hitting F4, and I see Sublime down here, or I can just start typing in the word Sublime, and here it's open. Sublime Text is an editor that opens up programming text files, so we go ahead and File, Open, and open up a Ruby file, which I know is a Ruby file from the extension .rb. Sublime also knows that it's a Ruby file, and therefore starts doing syntax highlighting. Comments are colored a certain color to make it distinguish it from the regular code. Strings are highlighted yellow. And so this is a very handy way of helping you write code that makes it easier to read, and it also helps you catch errors. So for example, if I forgot to close this string, then Sublime says, oh, your string goes from here all the way down to here, and then it closes over there, which is not what I wanted, and all this yellow means that something was printed or entered wrong, and so it helps me catch that mistake. Another thing Sublime offers you for free is auto-completion. So if I start typing in P, U, like it starts to guess what I'm trying to enter, and I can just hit down or up and pick something like, oh, I want to enter parameter, and then hit enter. So Sublime sort of helps you by trying to guess what you're typing in next. You could just ignore it and just keep on typing without it, but it's very handy when you start saying, when you see an option and you're like, okay, that's the variable name that I want, and it's a long variable name, so me using autocomplete actually helps reduce the number of typos. Another thing Sublime does for you, while I'm typing normally, the tab would have a little X so that I can close it, but it turns that X into a little circle to indicate that there's some unsaved changes. And so if I hit File, Save, or if I hit Command S as the keyboard shortcut, it'll save those changes. Something that you might want to configure in your options, especially if you're programming in Ruby, you can go to Sublime Text and go to Preferences, Settings, User, to configure your user settings, and that'll open up a tab with this particular file. I have some settings in here that you may or may not need, but the ones that you want to pay attention to are tab size is 2 and translate tabs to spaces is 2. The majority of Ruby programmers use those as settings, and regardless of the programming language, those are decent settings to have to force Sublime in order to do that. If you use a different programming language and your programming community uses some different settings, then you can configure that here as well. Another setting that I have here is Save on Focus Lost to True. And that's sort of a weird setting to have to get used to in the beginning, but basically every time I make a change to a file, if I switch to a different tab or a different program, it'll automatically save my changes. So if you're familiar with working in Microsoft Word, that might feel a little bit weird. If you're familiar with working in Google Docs, which automatically saves your changes as you type, it's a little bit more natural. So it may be a personal preference, but a lot of programmers tend to use this because it's very frustrating when you find that your code isn't working just because you didn't save a particular change. One of the things that I'll show you is that when you're working with Sublime, you're often working with a project that has a bunch of different files, and so it would be pretty tedious to work on a particular file, then go to File, Open, and open up a separate file, and then go to File, Open, and open up the third file. And so Sublime offers a way to open things up more quickly. So if I go to Sublime and say Open, and instead of opening up an individual file, I'm going to go up one folder, and I want to open up the whole folder. So instead of clicking on any particular file or folder, I just click Open. And now Sublime opens up a separate window, but this time it has this folder tab or folder pane. And so here I can get a quick glance at any single individual file. Once I want to start editing a file, I can either double click it or just jump in here and start editing. And I can go ahead and make a new tab. I can close that. I can look at a different file. So it just gives me a much quicker way of accessing the files and folders in my project. Other than that, Sublime sort of just works out the box and makes it easier for you to program. There's some more advanced features and keyboard shortcuts that you can use to become like a power user of Sublime, and we'll get into some of those in a future screencast.